We're talking about the top challenges CPOs and product VPs face. Navigating them well can excel careers and result in valuable products. Navigating them poorly has, well, let's say, career limiting consequences. This discussion will help you avoid the latter, giving you approaches to address common product leadership challenges. Our guest has mentored more product leaders and executives than anyone else I know over his 40-year career in product roles. He has served as interim CPO for 15 companies, founded the first product camp, consulted to hundreds of tech companies, wrote the book The Art of Product Management, and his blog Product Bites is widely read by product leaders. From that description, you likely already know who our guest is, the one and only Rich Mironov. Rich has seen every product leadership disaster imaginable and knows how to fix them. Let's learn together how to address and even avoid such challenges right after this.
How can you unlock your full potential as a product manager? We're sharing the product management insights you need. They are based on the 7 research-backed knowledge areas for product mastery. You'll learn to create products customers love, enhance your influence, and elevate your career. Welcome to Product Mastery Now, hosted by Dr. Chad McAllister, product management professor, practitioner, and your guide.
Rich, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks. I'm thrilled to join. Thanks for letting me be here.
Oh, glad to talk again. So you've been in Silicon Valley for a long time, then you were in the Pacific Northwest. You recently made a change to Portugal. What is the product community like in Portugal?
It's a lot smaller than it was back in the San Francisco Bay Area, but very energetic. There's a lot of great people here, and I think it's really wide open to new ideas, which may or may not be new, but they may be a little newer here. A tremendous resource of young and up-and-coming product folks and product leaders, some great conferences. So
Yep.
I'm thrilled to be one of the longest serving, most senior gray-haired members of my new product community here.
Part of the gray hair group. Yep, absolutely. I'm sure they're delighted to have you as a resource in the community. It has been the product management has kind of led in U.S. areas, and I don't look at the stats very often for this podcast, but I know Germany was a big listener for a while, people there, and people want information from in other areas on product management and product leadership.
And I think what I'm seeing is all through Europe, there's tremendous interest. Berlin and London and Stockholm and a few other cities are really big for product, but everybody's hungry to be more successful. Everybody's looking to the Silicon Valley both for positive and negative lessons. And there's just a lot of fresh, open, energetic folks here in Europe that are eager to get in the game.
Right. Very good. Well, let's dive into product leadership topics and issues. I've heard you talk about first principles for product leaders. What are your first principles?
I just recently put out a pretty long-winded post on this, I think, that might be useful about what we fight for. Because I think the question that comes up a lot is not how do we do product, but what's important in an executive suite where you only have a few choices of what you're going to wrestle over. For me, the 3 things that we fight for as product leaders, first, it's the real users, the end users of the things we build, as distinct from internal customers. The second is the extended teams that work for us. So if we're product leaders or R&D leaders, we've got product managers and designers and engineers and test folks and DevOps and tech writers and all these folks who don't get much visibility or support or political clout in the organization. And so as a product leader, I feel like I have to step up and identify their wins and be their champion because no one else will. And then the last thing, and maybe it isn't last, I think we as product folks, product leaders, have to support the overall health of the business instead of individual deals or individual ideas or some crazy thing. So when there's an opportunity to do something which is good for all the users and makes the company money and leads to goodness, that's more important than the hot deal that needs to close this week. And so that defines, I think, which side of the argument I want to be on most of the time.
Okay. So first principles, real users of the products that we're creating for them, that those extended team people that we should be caring for as well, often under the leadership of the CPO, product VP, and then the overall wellness of the organization.
Yeah, I think that's plenty to do.
Yeah.
Notice that if you're the product leader and you're doing those things, you're not doing product management on individual products, right? So it means delegating all of the things that we loved when we were coming up the ladder to the next group of folks coming up the ladder who are going to do at least as good a job at those things as we are, especially if we mentor them. So it's as you become a product leader, a CPO, a VP of product, it's much more about the organization. It's much more about how we make decisions, building coalitions at the executive suite to get the right
Mm-hmm.
things done, and something that I just spend endless time on. How do we understand and communicate with and negotiate with the folks across the aisle on the go-to-market side?
Okay.
So sales and marketing and finance and operations, they're really not very interested in how we make product.
Last time we talked, I remember you mentioning that point, which surprised me a little bit just from my perspective, because I probably think about this a bit differently. Like, well, if we're at the executive team, I want each function to have some understanding of what the other functions are. But this hasn't really been your experience. Like, no, they don't care how product gets made. They're really
Right.
focused on their functions.
And it's on occasion that we find folks in the executive suite who are actually interested in how we do our jobs. But I think it's a rarity. It's an outlier. It's a poor set of assumptions. I know, and I'm an enterprise guy, so that colors a lot of what I say. I know that the sales organization is all about closing sales and hitting quota and making money,
Right.
right? And it's not about long-term architecture, and it's not about the long-term happiness of the customers, and it's not about caring how we test things or how beta works or anything about agile or discovery. They're very focused on the thing they're focused on, right?
Yeah.
And in fact, I have a talk I've given occasionally where I put up this picture of a guy that a friend of my daughter's made for me. He's all dressed in golf stuff. He's got a golf logo on his hat, and he's got a golf logo on his t-shirt and all the stuff, and he's got a beer in his hand and he's waving it around. And I use this with large audiences to ask who in the audience has ever been trapped at a cocktail party with somebody who wants to spend a half hour talking to you about golf or Dungeons and Dragons or the stock market or something else that you're completely not interested in. And everybody raises their hand and they say, okay, when you're in the executive suite talking about how we prioritize things in the backlog, you're that person.
Right. This is
Right?
true.
Because the folks around the table have maybe even worse than zero interest. They have negative interest. What they want is you to tell each of them they can each have all the things they want. Right? In a perfect world, we would have an infinite engineering team and an infinite product team, and everyone would get everything they wanted. That's what they're waiting for. And we insist on lecturing them about why they can't have cookies with dinner.
So how do you frame that conversation, right? When I'm talking executives, I'm usually thinking in terms of money, risk, maybe market expansion.
Exactly right. I think it's incumbent on us, if I back up a step, we know in our hearts and in our bones that when we talk with our end users about the things our products do, what they really want to know is the benefits to them, not how we built it.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Our product's going to make you taller and better looking and younger, and you can run a 2.5 minute mile. How we do that's less important. When we're talking to the folks in the executive suite on the go to market side, what they're interested in is when the money's going to arrive and how much money it's going to be and how many more customers we're going to close. And I think as product folks, we're really not trained to have that conversation. But it's incumbent on us as product leaders to finish the sentence. Instead of saying, well, we're going to make a bunch of improvements that reduce churn by 2%.
Right.
Right? You have to finish the sentence and say, by the way, if we can reduce churn by 2%, that's $45 to $50 million more on the top line, and we can IPO a year earlier, and everybody else at the table can retire to Fiji or Malta or wherever they're going to go 2 years earlier. Right? We have to put the benefit in, and at the executive level, it's mostly about money.
Yeah.
And so we have to say this design team is going to be able to get folks onboarded faster, and therefore we're going to do more transactions and make more money and spend less on support and make more money and get better word of mouth and make more money, and to quantify that somehow so that when somebody wants to cut the budget for design, we can say we all agreed that there's 10 to 50 million dollars on the floor here that the design team's going to help us recover. So if you don't have something that's worth 10 to 50 million dollars, I don't want you interrupting our design team for $1 million opportunity. Notice
Right.
that nobody cares what that opportunity is or what design people do. We have to speak in the currency and the language of the folks in the room, which is you can have that, but it's going to cost the company millions or tens of millions of dollars, which I think you don't want when I put it in the right framework and the right terms.
Hmm.
And that's something that honestly, I almost never met a chief product officer who's been trained to have that conversation.
Right.
We're all trained to talk about process and happy customers and more efficient R&D, none of which directly translate in the minds of people who don't care to the money that they're looking for us to generate.
Right. Well, you just gave everyone moving into that leadership role already. There are some excellent tips on how to do that. We all know communication is about forming things in terms of our audience, but this is an element when I have talked to product leaders who have recently moved into the role of wading through this, they realize they have to talk differently to the people under them than they used to. And they have to talk to the executive team around them differently. And it takes time to be more people focused than that kind of individual contributor. What are the features that make our customers happy?
That's right. And the things that got us into the chief product officer chair are all about process and delivery and understanding how to get really good products built. And unfortunately, that's not the things that are of most interest to the new audience. So
Hmm.
we've got to retrain ourselves. We have to understand that audience. We have to know what they do and what they care about and what motivates them, which we're trained to do for other groups. But it's just not a natural transition. And so a lot of my coaching, which is only with chief product officers and VPs of product, is around these kinds of communications and framing and really understanding what the folks around the table care about.
Right. Yeah, the people part of that. Another aspect of product leadership, as we are in that role, has to do with more lean operations in some sense, reducing waste, trying to reduce failures along the way, optimize things. What's your advice to product VPs, CPOs about reducing waste?
I think I like to divide waste into two groups, two piles, and one which is the one everybody sees, which is what we call engineering waste. It was late, there were quality issues, right? There were some problems with the spec or the delivery or whatever. I see that's the smallest minority of the product failures that we have. When we look at product waste, which I define as shipping things that don't make money or don't make users happy or don't generate the outcome, I see that as the majority of the failures. We built just what we intended to build, just what we thought we were asked to build, and it didn't deliver the business outcome, the revenue, the happy customers, the growth. And I think it's important as product leaders, we not blame that on engineering, because engineering is following our lead, right?
Right.
And almost all the cost cutting efficiency discussion is about, can we ship faster? When as a product leader, I can't make us ship faster. What I can do is to reduce the number of things we built that land like a dead thud in the market, right? And that's not an obvious thought for anyone in the executive suite. It's really not. Nobody thinks of that. And nobody remembers the product failures as distinct from engineering. And so, as a product leader, I've got to be able to show, by the way, not tell, but show that my product team's actually making good decisions and
Mhm.
that the decisions they're making are actually well informed and better than some of the decisions that were being made before, right?
Yeah.
Because there's a not very subtle thing that everybody else sees that we miss, which is when we start talking about product operating systems, which, by the way, is a phrase that I would never use in the executive suite because nobody cares about it and it's meaningless. But what we're really talking about when we productize the company and we move to more product processes is we're going to take away some of the decision authority that sales owns, that marketing owns, and we're going to move that decision authority to the product team or the larger R&D team. Now, when I frame it that way, no one else in the room is excited by that
Right.
proposal, right? I've never
Especially sales.
especially I've never met a salesperson who didn't tell me that they knew exactly what every customer needed, right or wrong. And generally it's written on a post-it note in no more than 10 words. And can't you just do it? Because it's got to be really easy. It's probably only 10 lines of code
Of
and
course it
I need
is.
it by Friday. And I already wrote it into the contract, right?
Right.
But when we hide the fact or miss the fact that what we're doing is we're taking decision authority away from the sales organization. First of all, there's a tremendous human reaction here. We've moved their cheese, right? And the other is we haven't proven to them that we're going to make better decisions that make more money for
Hmm.
them, right? We're taking the decision authority away in advance of proving that we're worthy. And that just leads to all kinds of fist fights among the C-suite, and product rarely wins those because sales has a bunch of current quarter things they're dangling, right? And
Revenue is king.
revenue is king or queen or whatever you
Hmm.
happen to be, right? And so the idea that we're going to march into the executive suite and put some book on the table that says we should do a product operating model, I think is fundamentally misunderstanding how any decision gets made in a company and assuming all this both knowledge and goodwill from everybody who's willing to give up their place in the organization to a bunch of product managers who may or may not have distinguished themselves yet, right? And so that whole selling model I think is wrong. But we're trained as product folks to believe in ourselves above all others. I don't know if you know this, but we're always the smartest people in the room, right? Just ask a product manager. And that everybody's going to go along with this because for some philosophical reason it's right.
There is a bit of we know better in that, right?
That's
And,
right.
and I want to focus on that a little bit about how do we actually know better, right? Because product waste, you said, in some fashion, is we need to do things that actually deliver value to the customer and the organization. And we need evidence for that that others are going to believe.
That's right. That's right. And I think that's really central. This idea, and we all have it, right? As much imposter syndrome as I see in everybody in the product world, we all actually believe that we are smarter than the other folks at the table. And it might be true, but it's not a good selling strategy,
Right.
right? Especially if you say it out loud, right? And so this sort of philosophical process-driven sales model where we're going to announce a new approach, I think lands badly. So,
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
let's back up to what we can do. And I always use the word show instead of the word tell because telling doesn't work here, right? So there's a few ways you can show. One of them, I mean, the one I like the best, if we use the small a agile mentality, which says we're going to do some things that are small and cheap and quick, that are going to have positive results, and we're going to merchandise those like crazy within the company to show everybody that if you just get out of our way and let us make some small decisions, we can deliver more customers, more revenue, more upsell, more whatever, right? And attach money to that, dollars or euros or pounds, wherever you are, right? And to be on a campaign for a few quarters or maybe a year where we relentlessly deliver value and merchandise it as product value and show everybody that we're actually making them better off,
Hmm.
right? Before we snatch from them the opportunity for them to make decisions, right? That's the one in a relatively healthy organization where we get some slack, we get a chance to show, we've got good teams, there's not huge dysfunction going on,
Right.
right? And I like that best, but it takes a lot of time. And what we're doing there is we're building trust and we're collecting evidence and we're, again, merchandising it like crazy because otherwise nobody's going to see it and everybody else takes credit for it, right? So that at the end of some unit of time, a couple or 3 quarters, when we say, look at these things we've done, everybody says, I'd like some more of that.
Right.
Right? And the price of wanting some more of that is that we're going to move some larger decisions over to the product side, and we're going to rearrange how we get the work done so that you can have more of what you already want.
Okay. On the merchandising aspect, so as a product leader, I'm trying to influence the executive team, build my trust with them, and influence. So in the future, I can do more of what I want to do that I think
Yes.
is best for the customer and the company. How are you merchandising? How are you packaging that communication to say, here's the things we did this last quarter that really moved the needle on our business?
I think, first of all, it may be the most important job of a CPO, and nobody ever
Hmm.
puts it in your job description. But lots of things we would do. I would expect to have a weekly, let's say it starts as an email, and then it's doubled up as my announcement, my update in the weekly staff meeting, and then it appears in the monthly all hands meeting, right? So there's a bunch of venues, but almost every week I need something from my extended team that they're going to give me that says, here's the thing that happened this week and here's why it was driven by product or design or engineering, right? We just improved the throughput on our reporting system, which means we can now finally add all the customers that have been waiting because the system's been too slow. Engineering, right? We just made a bunch of improvements to our sign up form, and 3% more people are successfully completing the form than a month ago. And that's 25 million a year to the company. Design win, right? We did a bunch of customer interviews and discovery, which nobody values except us, and we learned something really neat about a new market opportunity, and we're sketching out and mocking up a possible new product, which, if it's good, is going to represent add numbers, add value, add money, right? So that's one, which is merchandising the actual wins. The other one that honestly that I love even more than that. So not every week, but I'd say every second or third week, in my group meeting with all my product managers, I'd ask every single person in that meeting to give me the name of somebody who's not a product manager who did something really good in the last 2 or 3 weeks that needs thanking. And there's double bonus points for junior people and double bonus points for groups that aren't usually thanked, like support and test, right? And then I, as the product leader, send an email or whatever it is to the VP who runs that organization saying, so and so, or this team that reports to you, did something really good this last 2 weeks, and we want to thank you so you can thank them for closing this really serious bug, or discovering this inefficiency in the operations, or finding and finally understanding this set of obscure tests that was driving us crazy, or
Yeah.
whatever. So it's up and over and then down, because what that does is it identifies that the product folks really know what good looks like, and it encourages everyone in the company at the ground level to actually work with us. Because when we see good work, they get appreciated, and every once in a while they get promoted or a bonus or something from their boss, right? Not from us. And so
Right.
that creates this virtuous circle of product knows what we're doing, product sees the good work, we want to be with or maybe even be on the product team. What else? There's a lot more that goes into this sort of promotional thing. Last one for me is we need to take the most important OKRs or whatever we're measuring and translate them into money. So we have to say, again, if reducing churn in our consumer funnel is really important, all our folks are just working on reducing churn, but nobody's converting it to money. And so every week or every 2 weeks, I have to say, hey, we found another 0.6% improvement in the churn number, which translates into another $4 million a year, right? So that people start to hear about money from us in a positive way,
Right.
and it softens them up for when we're going to ask for something really hard or difficult.
Yeah. So this merchandising aspect might be the best takeaway for listeners, because I think, as you indicated, this is much of the job in terms of importance, and I suspect not engaged very much by product leaders that you talk to before you coach them. True?
Indeed.
Yeah.
Absolutely true. One of the things that I always encourage is if you're in that product leader chair, you block out a 15-minute meeting every Friday with just yourself, so nobody else can take the calendar away from you. And that 15-minute meeting is your merchandising meeting.
Mhm.
And every week, choose whatever it is, you are tasked with singing the praises and showing the wins of everybody in your extended R&D-ish organization, so that the rest of the company eventually notices, they don't understand it, but they eventually notice that the folks in that group do good work. They're not just sitting around eating bonbons and playing Fortnite. They're not idle, right? We couldn't outsource them all to some lower wage country and still get the same thing.
Right. Really good. I appreciate the detail you provided on how to influence the organization, what product is doing good, and just building that influence through a professional network you're expanding by helping helping the other VPs recognize what their people are doing to help out the organization as well. That's great.
Sure. Well, one other
Mhm.
thought on that before I let it go. So something else I've done a lot in the C-suite, and I always coach other CPOs to do, which is quiet and unseen. If I see one of my peers getting in trouble or making a bad decision or stumbling over something, so head of sales, head of marketing, head of operations, head of finance, it's not in scope for me to fix their problems. But it is in scope for me to pull them aside for some very quiet chat where I say, hey, it's not my job, and I'm not going to say this out in public, but I think the thing you're doing may have some risk you don't notice, or here's an idea for how you might do it better. As a member of the executive team, I think I owe all the other members of the executive team free, quiet, silent coaching on ways that they can make their function better or less bad so that the whole company thrives and we build more trust. And I want to do that well in advance of when they think I'm doing something wrong, because I want them to come to me offline quietly instead of calling me out in the executive meeting and point out something that I might do better. And if it isn't, I might explain it and we'll unwind that. But if we're really colleagues, if we really care about the business as a whole, how do we support each other at the executive level so that there's fewer fistfights and more success?
Yep. Really good. Good additional tip. For people that are listening that are product managers, which is a lot of people listening, thinking about maybe moving into leadership, from a leadership perspective, how do you make use of product managers better? There is this transition, right, from the individual contributor now to, you mentioned mentoring before,
Sure.
but how do you make better use of product managers?
I mean, maybe the most important thing is, as a product leader, I need to delegate as much of the product work as I possibly can. I don't have the time, I don't have the focus, I don't have the data, I'm not doing the customer interviews. I have to trust and look to all the folks on my product management team to bring me the good answers and the good insights and the good stuff. Not all of them can do it, right? But I want to start with that assumption. And then when someone brings me a piece of work, I want to critique it not as their boss, but as somebody who's done a lot of it and may have some insights. So I may critique it because I have some facts that they didn't know about because I have bigger scope. I may critique it because I've built an awful lot of roadmaps that look just like that, and I see a thing they may get in trouble with, right? But it's not me being the boss of them. It's me contributing or critiquing or having suggestions to get them to learn and be on track so they can be smarter than I am and they can do better product work than I do, because I'm transmitting the things I know and I'm coaching them through doing their job better. That's one. And the other is, if you're in an organization that has more than a couple of levels, you've got product managers and product directors, let's say, and a VP. The product directors are halfway up that transition because they have a product portfolio,
Right.
but they're both coaching the folks who work for them and also doing all the work that didn't get covered. So a lot of times they're player coaches, they're doing dual roles. And so for them, I'm always trying to find ways to show them, talk them through how they can be better leaders and give up more of the product work where they can, and or replace the folks who are on their staff who aren't cutting it. And by replace, let me back up and say, find another job in the company where some of the folks will be more successful, not fire them. Because if I, as a director, don't have a really strong set of product managers working for me, I end up doing the work.
Right.
Right. And gosh, product management's, it's such an obscure and narrow gig. Almost everybody in the company is doing something else. If there's somebody on my team or my director's team who's not a good fit for product management, they're almost always a good fit for something else in the company. So how do I help them find the thing they can be successful at, which also creates an opportunity now for me to go outside or inside and find somebody who's either already a great product manager or has the right stuff we can train and mentor them up. Because there's nothing worse than a product manager who's not enjoying it and not succeeding.
Right. And this does go back to influence. I had this great manager in an organization once, and he was so good at helping people in his team get in other functions in the organization that over the years, he had more influence as a middle manager in this organization than really anyone, right? Because he had people that loved him and were loyal to him, and it makes a huge difference. And if you can build that up along the way, that's powerful.
Sure. And it's the right thing to do. Whether or not it builds influence, if there's somebody who's in a product management job and shouldn't be or isn't succeeding, right? We should want to help them find the thing that they're going to be great at.
Sure.
And
Absolutely.
they're going to be very appreciative of it. Whether that leads to, it does lead to influence, and does lead to goodwill, and does lead to all of the great organizational positive loops here. But even if it didn't, we would be the good people that we are to do that.
Very wise. Okay, one last question for you. You talk about maker teams, product teams. You use language of maker teams. There's a lot of different team structures we might look at. Who's on that team? What do you like to see?
I have my strong preference. The place I'd start is you really want teams that are working, and if you're running an organization, you should know what that is and have your own point of view. For
Hmm.
me, probably a right-sized and good team is one product manager, one designer, and 4 or 5 or 6 developers or engineers or DevOps people or whatever the hard science people are. That seems usually to be the right size for me. If we don't have a designer and it's anything world facing or human facing, we usually force march the product manager into being a designer, which is usually a bad choice, right? And I think one good product manager who's not writing code and not deep necessarily in all the specs can keep a development team of 4 or 5 or 6 busy, and vice versa. When I see one product manager sprawled across 2 teams, I know they're failing and I know everybody's unhappy and it's treating them badly. And when I see a product manager tied to, let's say, only 3 engineers, 3 developers, I wonder that we're not getting enough throughput out of the product side.
That's good. I don't want to deter us taking us down other paths. Good to know how your preferred team structure is there. We do enjoy quotes around here, and I asked you to bring one. Before I ask you to share that with us, in way of a sponsor ad, which today is going to be training that I do for people, you mentioned mentoring before, and this is often why product VPs will reach out to me, is to say, hey, we need to do some care and feeding for our product managers, show them some love, and give them an opportunity to get skilled up as well. And I have a system for that called the Rapid Product Mastery Experience. You've helped me think through that a little bit as well in the past. I appreciate that, Rich. For anyone that wants to learn about that, simply go to productmasterynow.com and you'll find information on the RPM experience. It is a research-backed approach to learning 7 elements that product people need to know to be more successful. And you'll find it also builds trust and collaboration along the way. So, quotes, Rich, what did you bring for us and what does it mean to you?
I brought something there. There's a really smart woman that I met at Stanford named Pam Fox Rowan, and she's really an expert in organizational behavior and reward systems and general HR organizational consulting kinds of things. Years ago, I was in a group that she ran one of the Myers-Briggs experiments and such, and she told me something which I wrote down and has been really valuable ever since. She said, other people are not an imperfect version of you. They're a perfect version of themselves, right? And what was important about that, and it refers all the way back to how we started this conversation, is, gosh, I'm so glad that the world isn't only populated by product managers, because what a boring place, right? And what we need to do is we need to understand the people and their motivations on our teams and in our companies and our customers and our user bases, and not assume that because they don't know things we don't know, they're stupid, or they can't do a thing we can do, that they're somehow imperfect or faulty. We want to take people where they are and find the goodness in them and understand their motivations and what they can do that we can't do. All of those sort of personality maps are, in my mind, useful mostly because they remind us that most people are in some other box than we are. And even the ones in the same box we are, because there's only 16, aren't really as like us as we would think. And so we have to be humble and we have to be open to people in the world who are very different from us.
Right.
And we have to meet them where they are, not where we are, because it's our job to move things along and deliver value.
I love the quote and relate to it very well. And you mentioned Myers-Briggs. I had this experience going through the Center for Creative Leadership, and we did the Myers-Briggs thing. And I recognized before, as a software product manager leading teams and had a lot of actual authority over the team members, there were individuals that I did not care to work with very closely. And we did this Myers-Briggs thing, and I'm an ISTJ for those who have done such thing. And the people that frankly rubbed me the wrong way were P and Fs. They had those letters among the 4. And after doing this, the quote is spot on for me that they are perfect versions of themselves. I sought those people out because they were the ones that actually provided the best catalyst for improvements on the team. And so I completely flipped how I thought about this, right? That I needed those people for the team to really work well.
Yeah, and in the office setting, in the CPO office setting, the way it comes to me most as a B2B enterprise guy is salespeople are some of the worst product managers on the planet. By the way, product managers are some of the worst salespeople on the planet. And I've grown over the years to love and appreciate the sales team because they bring in the money that pays our salaries. But I don't confuse that with wanting them to be on my team.
Right. Yep, we have our roles to play for sure. So
That's right.
that's wonderful. Rich, how can people find out about the work you're doing? You are still coaching product leaders. You're involved in other ways. Where should people go?
Cleverly, I registered my last name as a domain name in 1991.
You saw this coming.
The now former Soviet states weren't on the net yet. So my email address, rich@mironov.com, my blog, which has been up since 2001, is at mironov.com. I'm on Substack. I'm on LinkedIn. I'm really easy to find. And I think there's two kinds of folks, especially who might want to reach out to me more directly than just sign up for the monthly newsletter, which multiply 25 years times 12 months, and that's how long it's been going. One is chief product officers or heads of product or VPs of product who really resonate with this kind of discussion and are looking for some more formal coaching. There's always room on my calendar for one or two more. And the other is more generally folks who are going through some senior product career transition or think that it's only them or need a little bit of one-on-one love and attention. We all have imposter syndrome. We all think every other company is better than the one we're at. So there's a lot of folks who reach out to me for the one-off, talk me off the ledge kind of thing.
Yep.
Again, I'm really easy to find, and as long as you're in a European time zone or willing to get up early in North America, it's my pleasure to pay it forward and help folks out.
Fantastic. So best place to go is your last name, mironov.com, and it's Mironov, which must be why you got it before the Russians.
There's 25 or 50 million folks in that part of the world with my last name, but I got there first.
But we got the domain first. Fantastic. Well done. So, Rich, great catching up with you. Thank you so much for sharing the information on some of the issues and challenges and how we can work through those from a product leader perspective.
It's my pleasure, and thanks for hosting.
And everyone listening, if you do want the written version of what we discussed, relevant links as well, simply go to productmasterynow.com/559. As always, keep innovating.
Thank you for listening to Product Mastery Now, where product leaders and managers gain product mastery through practical knowledge, influence, and confidence. By listening, you are becoming a product master, creating products customers love. Find additional resources at productmasterynow.com. Keep innovating.